you see people seeing something amazing, like watching a sunset, and they're filming it on their phone. I looked around, and the amount of people who were filming the fireworks versus actually just looking at it. You look at all the kids are just like, wow. But all the adults are like, oh, I have to capture the moment. And it's like, but the moment is happening right now. If we're constantly trying to capture it through a device, we miss the moment, right? How many times do we go back and watch that? There were some beautiful crystal formations that came out. That was a minute of intention. Yeah. So I think it demonstrates how powerful our thoughts are and how those thoughts can affect.
Welcome to the Swedish Wealth Institute Podcast. I am your host, Daniel Wood. Today, we are joined by Lawrence Eliard. We're going to be exploring wellness, longevity, mindfulness, and what Lawrence calls the new woo. This is something I am truly passionate about because, many of the things that used to seem strange, used to seem fringe, like breathwork, cold plunges, sauna, red light therapy, grounding, meditation, nervous system regulation, are now becoming more mainstream and scientifically proven. And I think that's a good thing because for a long time, a lot of people have approached health in a very reactive way. Something goes wrong, we try to fix it. What Lawrence is really talking about is a more proactive approach. How do we take care of our body, mind, and nervous system and work on our inner world so that we feel better before it breaks down? So what I really liked about Lawrence's perspective in this episode is that he doesn't present wellness as a magic thing that solves everything. It's more personal than that. It's about testing, listening to your body, building better routines, and finding practices that actually help you feel grounded, present, and alive. In this conversation, we talk about why wellness practices that used to be considered woo-woo are now becoming a part of everyday life. How sleep, stress regulation, digital detoxing, nature, breathwork, and cold exposure can support real health. And why presence, community, curiosity, and service may be just as important as the latest health trend. We will also get into the spiritual and energetic side of wellness, including Reiki, intention, consciousness, and how our thoughts may affect the way we experience life. So I'm excited to share this conversation with you. Let's get into it. Welcome, Lawrence. I love health, wellness, and longevity. So I'd love to hear, what is the new woo and what is it you've been seeing here over the last couple of years?
Yeah, well, I feel like there's been a growing trend towards wellness, and what was considered the woo-woo quite a few years ago is becoming more and more mainstream. Yeah, that people are talking about biohacking. They're looking at ways to do breathing for recovery, cold plunge, red light therapy, meditation. This is becoming a part of everyday lingo. It's not considered on the fringe so much anymore,
Oh, I have all of those things in my home.
So there's a real growing trend towards that. The idea of the new woo is to shine a brighter light on that and all the different experts and thought leaders that are not only people who've been in this for a very long time, but also the new and emerging talent in the wellness space and giving them a voice, visibility. The ultimate goal is that we can impact more people and reach more people with wellness and the things that really are tested, tried, that make impacts, that make a difference in people's lives.
So out of these things that people are using, you mentioned all these new lingo words. What are you seeing are actually having the biggest impact for people's health?
Yeah, well, I think, we're seeing a lot of modalities that are really about bringing people together and greater community wellness events, things like that. So just over the summer months here, being in Australia, there was a lot of events where people were coming to do, group yoga, group cold immersion, group breath work, so I think with the rise of AI and this experience that a lot of us are having, we're online, we don't know what's real and what's not. So it's almost like the human reaction is like, well, what is real? What connects us? What is human? So, I think this is the trend, and I think that will be amplified over years, right? That we want to know, coming back to grassroots, nurtures what feeds our soul, what our body, our mind, all of those things are definitely, I think, on the rise. And I think also we see the more traditional approach to medicine and health, and it's a prescription pill, or it's a a 10-minute visit with your doctor, and they're supposed to know about your health and wellness. So it's quite different if we go down the complementary therapies route. Then we're seeing that there's a greater emphasis on, making something quite bespoke, quite unique for the individual. It's like getting a consultation, whether it's with a naturopath or whether it's mind-based cognitive therapies like hypnotherapy or kinesiology or energy work or somatic work. Like all of these therapies are really being amplified more and more. And I think there's a growing emerging movement towards something other than a pharmaceutical route, which of course, has its merit. There's obviously times when, that's absolutely essential. But it's also about like, how do we adopt other avenues that aren't necessarily becoming, dependent on that particular system?
Yeah. Well, of course, pharmaceuticals are more of a reactive science, right? Something is wrong. Let's take medicine. Let's fix it. Well, my sense is a lot of these other things are more on the proactive side of trying to make sure we're healthy first. So what are you seeing? Like if someone listening to this episode wanted to make one big change in their life, what is kind of the most important thing for their health they can do?
Look, I think anything that's to do with optimal sleep is obviously, the body's chance to recharge and nourish and repair. There's a lot of science behind all of that. So, good quality sleep. The other thing that I think would be, having more refined way of relaxing and dealing with stress, because we live in a fairly digital, disconnected, removed from nature reality for people in cities and so forth. So I think it's like, how do we regulate our nervous system without reaching for a bottle or a substance or some other outlet where we disengage or dull? And then like, how do we amplify our connection to nature? How do we regulate our nervous system through meaningful connections, practices that support, regulating and taking the stress out of, what is often a normal experience for people. People operate on a certain level of stress and then they go away on a vacation or holiday and then they get sick because it's like they've been operating at this incredibly high level. And then there's, the bodily processes suddenly go, oh, okay, we're not working now. We can completely fall apart, right? So how do we bring that optimized experience into daily life where it's not just about, getting by or just coping, but actually, thriving in, a busy experiential world? And, looking after ourselves and, obviously being a great role model for others in that process too.
It's easy to say, get better sleep. Like how do we do that? Let's say it is someone who has trouble getting quality sleep. What can they do?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of the, pre-ceremony before sleep, which is really critical, right? So if you're just making sure that you're getting off blue light or devices, at least an hour before sleep, and then doing something like, traditional, like reading a book, like an actual physical book, not on a tablet, but actually turning pages or doing something where, you're connecting to your breath. And then, there's a lot of different herbal type approaches that can be really supportive, different types of teas and tonics and, ways to kind of wind down. It's a bit like, most people start the day and they go from 0 to 100, right? And they're cruising at altitude and then they crash, and it's like a bit like a plane ride. You want to have a nice smooth takeoff, reach a good peak, be optimal at that space, but not go down, but go a gradual decline, and not in a bad way, but, descent into more rest and simply, going out in nature and having a walk bare feet on the grass or something like that can just be incredibly grounding and, connecting to different breath work. And, when we're doing our breathing, we're just becoming mindful of what's happening in the body. And there's so many different approaches. So I think it's not like also that one size fits all. Like if you do this A, B, C, D, you're going to get this exact result, right? Because it can also be, what's cooking upstairs, in the mind. And if we're ruminating over what, went wrong or what was bad or, or we're worried about the future or we're stressing about something that's already passed, that obviously is going to affect our experience of what we take into sleep when we eventually do go to sleep, right? So I think, the idea of having some sort of, at the end of your day, having a bit of a gratitude practice, having this idea of like, well, what was meaningful, what good, from my day. And sometimes, look, we have a shitty day, right? We have a bad day because like so many things happen and we're just like, oh my God, and thank God it's over. But even in those moments, you can still do that. You can just be like, well, I had a really nice sandwich, or I tied my shoes really well. Like even if something just very small is the little thing that tends the mind towards potential. And certainly, counting your blessings, like, I'm living in a free country. There's healthcare. I got a warm bed or whatever it might be. It can just be very simple, mundane things, even if there's nothing outstanding from the day, having a bit of a recount of what was good. And then likewise, how we wake up is important too, because that sets the standard, right? And often people just reach for their device, which happens to also normally be like on their bedside table, right? So it's like in arm's reach.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of merit to, going for an old fashioned alarm clock and actually removing your device from where you sleep, because it's not about sleep, right? Some people will say, oh, but I need it for my, to wake up. And it's like, well, there were other ways to wake up before phones, and there's, it's a genuine thing where people have anxiety if they're not near their phone because they're like, oh, they're constantly having to see. So I think in conjunction with that, going on a digital detox or having some sort of rules where, when you're eating with the family or your partner or whoever it is, consciously not have that on the table. And I think people, I think if you're at a dinner or a gathering and, the phone's right there in front of you, it kind of signals that this thing is more important than what's happening in front of me, right? So it's a bit of a training, because I think we get so caught on this idea of being hooked onto our media, focusing on that all the time. And it's like, well, you see people seeing something amazing, like watching a sunset, and they're filming it on their phone. Well, it's like, well, just take it in. Went to a fair a little while ago and there was fireworks. And I looked around, and the amount of people who were filming the fireworks versus actually just looking at it. But you look at all the kids are just going, wow. But all the adults are like, oh, I have to capture the moment. And it's like, the moment is happening right now. So I guess I'm calling, this idea of like, well, what is presence to us as well, and how do we call presence more into our everyday experience? Because then we get to experience the richness of the moment. We don't miss it. If we're constantly trying to capture it through a device, we miss the moment, right?
Save
and
it
how
for
many
later. Yeah.
times do we go back and watch that show of the fireworks? Maybe once or never. This is generally what happens. I get it. It's like, your child is taking his first steps, or you're capturing a moment that is for prosperity, and it is about connection and family and whatever it is. But so often we get caught on trying to capture the thing that is actually incredible right now in the moment. So I think there's an element of how we can better master our minds, our thoughts, our behaviors. I always say that.
How does your evening routine look? How do you prepare for sleep?
Yeah, well, like I've got definitely a bit of a routine with that, and I not like to sort of have a shower just to sort of wind down before going to bed, and then getting what I'm going to wear if I'm wearing something to bed. It depends on the weather or how warm it is. But then also, just going through sort of the routine of how I get myself ready. And then there's usually like a couple of teas that I drink. I combine a few different ones. So I have like a nice calming tea, and there's all other sort of herbal supplements which can be helpful. And depending on the regulations in the country you're in, then CBD oil or THC oil, sort of indica strain can be, the right dose, obviously, that to kind of wind down, the body and the system. And then, going, just connecting to my body, breathing, mindfulness. And then, like I described, what was cool, or what was great today. And that, and then just going off into, some thinking about something joyful, because your mind naturally just sort of fades. But people can, go listen to different guided meditations. Some people like to fall asleep to gentle, sound of rain, a rain soundtrack, or it's just rain, or whatever it might be. Again, I think it's really personal, and I would encourage people to try out what works best for them. And you see, you find out pretty quick, because guess what? You wake up and you go, oh, I did fall asleep, right?
Exactly.
That's the proof.
So out of all this, obviously there's coming a lot of research now on health and, the red light therapy and ice baths and all these, a lot of things that have been done for thousands of years in parts of the world that are now being scientifically proven. Out of all that, what has been the most surprising for you that's like, wait a sec, this is actually really good for us?
Yeah, look, for me, I'm a real fan of saunas. and like hot, cold, that sort of,
I mean, I live up in the Nordics. That's what we do. So yes.
yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, yeah. And, some of the greatest warriors of history, right, from that region. And I think they were very robust and fortified, by pushing the body to these extremes, but not obviously to a dangerous level. But I was on a cold immersion retreat with Wim Hof
Oh, cool.
a few months ago, and we did a 10-minute cold immersion that, like, I'd done 3 minutes. I heard, oh well, 3, that's the winning number, right? Anyway, we did this ice bath with about 50 of us. I mean, not all at the same time, but we're
Right.
probably a good 20 or so people in this, essentially like a swimming pool. But it was
Right.
about 60% ice, about
Wow.
40% water, so it was very, very cold. And we stayed in there for 10 minutes, and it was a real mind over matter experience,
Mm.
yeah. And
Yeah.
we all actually just connected eyes with each other in the pool, because we're in a circle, right? And then
Nice. I
it
was
was,
thinking you were going to say shared trauma creates friends, but
I guess it does too, but I think there's a certain element where, as a human animal, we have this
yeah.
instinct of survival kicks in, right? And it's like, if you can just relax in the face of that, anxiousness or anxiety, and again, because we're all there together,
Mhm.
we actually just started to unify. We all started to sort of hum, make a sound together,
Oh,
and there was just this, like, this is easy, and you look, I tell you, getting out after 10 minutes, like, the body was kind of almost into atrophy, like it was a real, like, it's a bit like, when you're at the gym and you're doing that last pull, the bench press, the last one to
yeah.
just get it on the bar. It was that kind of feeling, like the body was like
Nice.
really working. But like, the feeling afterwards was a huge, elation, and
Yeah.
a lot of, good, legal hormones running through the body, right?
And
All
there's
the
a
good stuff.
feeling after a cold plunge how the body is like reheating itself from the inside rather than,
Yeah,
taking in hot heat from the outside. I take
yeah,
an 8-minute cold bath every morning.
yeah, great.
It's huge. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So all this sort of stuff, is about, and there's lots of research about how that, optimizes the health,
Yeah.
and also sharpens the mind as well. So yeah. So I still enjoy a good strong coffee in the morning. Not going to lie, like, uh, you know, that's my good drug of choice. But it's I guess it's like we're bringing that sort of mindfulness to whatever it is that you do, right? And yeah, so I think it's also, good to do things to pattern interrupt. So we can often be
Yeah.
caught in doing, yes, routines are useful, but also, it's good to keep the mind alert to about what else is possible. So mixing routines and seeing how that affects you as well is, so I think, look at the human organism a bit like, a scientist looking through the microscope and going, oh, what's this being doing now? What does it need
Mm.
now? So keeping it fresh is also, I think, really interesting, because again, there might be a nuance that you try, and then you go, oh wow, hang on, that's completely a game changer, right? But if we hadn't tried, we might not have discovered that. A little bit like in business too, we kind of keep trying things, and we fail, and we try and fail and try and fail, and then we move closer to the thing that works. So it's not too different, I think, with our health and well-being.
Let's talk about the energy side of things, because I think a lot of people are coming into now a lot of the health stuff, right? The red light therapy, the cold plunges, drinking water, being healthy overall. But there's a lot to, like, you've done a lot in Reiki and other types of energy practices. How is
Yeah.
that affecting us, and how is that provable now? I think is interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, there's been lots of experiments, double blinds, and, focusing on the effect of consciousness on plants or
Yeah.
matter. And Masaru Emoto, who I did some study with, who did the effect of consciousness on water, and they were freezing the ice crystals. Actually happen to have a copy of that right here. That's this book,
All right.
The Spirit of Water. So we did this experiment with some of my students, and we were directing positive energy and intention to the Tokyo tap water. And what was really interesting is we did a before and after. So we they froze the water and they looked under the dark field electron microscope to see what was forming, and it was all distorted and fragmented and looked really messy, right? The
Right.
regular tap water from Tokyo, or probably any tap water, unless you happen to be, coming straight from a mountain stream or something. Anyway, and we just focused on that for like a minute, and then we took the vial of the tap water, and then we did the before and after. There were some beautiful crystal formations that came out, and that was a minute of intentions. In a way, I think it demonstrates how powerful we are, as how powerful our thoughts are, and how that those thoughts
And
can
you can
affect.
actually see it under a microscope have a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Like from a molecular level, it's completely restructured and changed. So, it also brings attention to the idea that, our bodies are mostly water, right? And also sound and frequency. This can obviously have an effect. You listen to a beautiful piece of music and you feel changed, right? And so I think it's just a powerful reminder that, with our thoughts, we are creating every moment, and the ways that we speak, or the intention we have, the internal self-chatter, like we might be the sweetest person, but inside we're like, oh, you're stupid. You start, chastising yourself if you make a mistake, right? And so I think it's important to look at the idea that it's not just what we're doing outwardly, it's also our inner world, our inner life. And, obviously like meditation or breath work or different mindfulness practices can be a huge support to, cultivating a greater peace of mind, happiness, and peace in ourselves.
What do you think is the biggest kind of mistake people make when they're trying to blend the more the spiritual side with business and the serious side of things?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, look, it's really interesting, the privilege to hang out and connect with some very high performance, high level business people, very successful people. And it's really interesting. For the most part, like I very rarely have encountered anyone who I was like, oh, wow, that is not someone I want to hang out with, right? Like, so
Right.
they're operating at this really high level. They're actually incredibly kind. And I think one of the biggest trends I see is that they're in this state of amazement and curiosity. So again, it's a bit like a wonderment of a child. And they're like, oh, wow, that's so cool. And tell me more, so they're all about like this can do. So they have this incredibly upbeat and positive take, I think, on reality. And it for sure works, right? It's really powerful, I think, to have that as a state of mind. I think where people can fall down is that it's, it's inauthentic, or they're trying to look or act or be a certain way, but inside they just don't feel that way, right? So I think it's a little bit about, an affirmation said over and over can't necessarily cut the mustard, right? Because you might be saying, I'm prosperous, and then you're unconscious, or your inner voice is like, no, you're not. You're having a bad time, or whatever it is, Whereas I think if we're making a declaration towards what we want to create, like I invite prosperity and joy and opportunity, and, we see ourselves in our desired state. So we're actively participating rather than giving a command. I think it's this idea that, the way we show up is a little bit like there's the printer, which is, you could say, is your mind or your consciousness or your spirit. What is manifest in the world is like the printer, what we print out, right? So if we are not attuning the printer, or you could say the computer, with the right messaging, then what comes out isn't going to be a match, right? So I think it's important to look at the different ways that we can, watch our thoughts, what's our mind, get clear about, our intention, what we want to create, how we're doing that in the spirit of collaboration and generosity. All this stuff is very powerful. It's going to be very uplifting. If we're looking at it from the, what's in it for me, and that guy's an idiot, or whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like if you're living in this place of judgment and, us versus them, then it's a very small, narrow view, right? There's not many options. If we look at life through the lens of, wow, what's amazing? Like, what are you up to? What's exciting you? What's possible? Then suddenly you're sending out this message to the world that says, bring what's possible, what's amazing, what's something that's going to connect us all.
I like that. Well, one of the things I think a lot of our listeners have reacted to over the last couple of years is there's so many, social media trends on health. How do we distinguish like the serious integrative health from these, trends and social media reels.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I think you look at the results, right? So, it's also how do you work out who's the right person to work with or the method to try. I think a lot of it is trial and error to a degree. Just, trusting, guess where your body is. Yeah, hell yes. And if your body's like, oh, this doesn't feel right for me, then you should probably trust that. Like, the body actually knows. Usually the head gets into the rationality. It's like you give someone a hug, right? And you go, oh, this is beautiful, right? Or you give someone a hug and you're like, oh, no, I don't think I should have done that, or I want to get away.
Yeah.
So, the body, if we attune ourselves to, what we're noticing, it can actually be a huge, beacon of information. It can be broadcasting, and people broadcast so much, like through their tonality, through their body language. You look at different systems like NLP, the words we use, where the eyes go, all this stuff, and look, one can analyze that as well. And that's very much, can be quite a head process as well. But we can also then trust, like, where does this feel in my body? Does it feel natural? Does it feel like it flows? Is it easy, or is there ease? Doesn't have to be easy. It can be, sometimes, we've got to put the right effort to get the result. Yeah. So I think, again, it's a very personal experience, and it's trial and error. You've got to see what fits for you. I would love to be like, just do this one thing, and then all your problems are gone. Like, I don't think anybody's saying that, they might get lots of likes and engagement online, but it's not really based, I think, on, one size fits all. I don't think I've ever put on a piece of clothing that said one size fits all, and it was like this perfect for me, right? Because there is no one size fits all, really, so I think it's, like I said, I think it's very unique.
Ironically, I wanted to ask you, what are a couple things that people could implement into their life coming off of this call?
Sure.
What should we keep in mind?
Well, so again, I'm not saying there's a magic pill or whatever, but I'm saying, of course, there are principles that are very useful, right? So again, kind of mentioned this idea of, curiosity in situations. So not having a fixed mindset, but more of an open possibility mindset is obviously really useful. The other thing I'd be, coming from the perspective of, like, I'm one person, the others are many. So how can I be of service? How can I be in this spirit of contribution? So coming into a situation where it's like, again, go from me to we, go from like, how do I enrich, uplift others? My Buddhist teacher I studied with for many years, he said one thing. I mean, he said lots of things, but one thing that really stuck with me was always, he said, you want to go fast? And I was like, I was like a young man, I was like 20 something. I was like, yeah, I want to get wake up, and I want to be, switched on and be clear, and, he said, then come from a place of service. And he said, service is the quick path. You want to go fast and be showing up with contribution and with gratitude, with contribution, and you'll wake up a lot faster than, thinking, what's in it for me, or how do I get the thing, or how do I get that thing over that person, or I'm better than him, or, again, if we take the orientation of our self, self, whatever it is, self gratification, or everyone look at me, I was talking to my friend the other day, and he was with a mate of his, and they made this beautiful dinner. And then the guy gets the phone, and he took a photo of the food. And then my friends go, why are you taking a photo of the food? And he goes, oh, I want to post it on social media so someone will go. And like, who cares? Like, seriously, like, just enjoy the food and be present, and go, like, and be the person that goes, wow, because like, who are we impressing anyway? Like, people are so caught in, their own story, I love that saying too, of like, when you're young, you're so concerned with what other people will think of you. How do they see me? Will I be liked? Am I like this? Should I be like that? Then we get a bit older and we go, no, I don't care what they think. I'm going to do my own thing. And then we get older still and we go, actually, they were never thinking about me because they're so consumed in, am I good? Am I bad? Do they like me? They're doing that, So, we're not out here to, impress others necessarily. I think we should impress ourselves by bringing, reflection, looking at what we can create, how we can contribute. Like, I think that's probably a more impressive wow moment from where I sit anyway. So these are the ways I think we could utilize them, just some key principles. And again, try them on. It's like putting on a piece of clothing and going, oh, does it fit? Actually, no, it doesn't feel right. So, okay, then change it up, do something else. And I guess that speaks to strategy, that we don't, keep going to do the same thing that we always done and expect different results. It's this idea that if I just keep banging my head against this wall a little bit harder, then I'll get the result, and it's like, no, you'll get concussion. So it's the idea of looking at things on a very strategic level and pivoting if something isn't working. And often, we find ourselves in relationships, we find ourselves in, with a colleague at work or a situation that's difficult, right? And we often stay in it longer than we know we should. And then when we come out the other side, eventually we have the courage to make a change. Then we go, oh my God, I wish I hadn't, why did I wait so long?
Wasted all that time.
Yeah, I could have done that a year ago, And so it's often when we change or experience ourselves coming out of something that we go, now I get it. Yeah, we get the perspective. So we see this all the time, right? So I think if we're more attuned to ourselves and what's supportive, then we will probably notice these signals and then perhaps be a bit more courageous in our life to make changes, and maybe it's the small changes that could have been, the thing I could have said early on, but I didn't because I was afraid, or I was like, I didn't want to upset them. And it's like, no, say the thing and then, check it out. Maybe it was a complete delusion. Yeah. We might have made up a story. We often make up stories and then we find out, oh, it wasn't true, or it was something completely else, So if we're curious and we're courageous, there's so much opportunity. Yeah. If we're set in our ways and, we want the outcome to only be in this one way, then we limit so many options, So I think it's curiosity and courage are one of probably great pillars or principles to work with.
So every episode, we wrap up with a rapid fire round. So I'll ask you 5 questions and you just answer the first thing that comes to mind. You ready?
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool. So the future of wellness in one sentence.
Collaboration and connection and elevating each other through community.
What's one daily grounding ritual?
Deep breathing, just slow in and out inhalation, connecting to your body, grounding, connecting to the earth. That was 3, sorry.
No, that's a good one though. That we'll call that one full ritual.
We'll let that one slide, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What's one leadership trait for the next decade?
Leadership trait. I think it would be this idea of leading with compassion. So having this idea that everybody puts their pants on with one leg at a time. We're not so different. So again, what unites us, and we can do that through the lens of being compassionate towards each other.
What is one myth about mindfulness?
That it has to cost money, or we have to go somewhere, or we have to get the skills of someone to do it, and actually it's right here all the time. So we just have to be present and or pause and be there, not miss the moment. It's free, which is cool, right?
Yeah. Makes it a lot easier for everyone to be able to access. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
What's one word that defines your life's work?
Yeah, I would say it's hard. I've got a few, but I would say community.
So if our community here wants to connect with you and continue to learn from you, where do they go?
Yeah, well, you could go to my website, lawrenceeliard.com. I guess you'll have
we'll
that
link to that in the show notes.
Yeah. And then if there's anyone that's a wellness practitioner or educator or thought leader, then we have our global accreditation body. So that's for accreditation in the wellness, anyone in the wellness industry. And that is myiict.com. And again, I guess that'll be in the show notes or
yes. We'll add that in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. Look me up on Google. I'm everywhere or on Instagram or whatever, So yeah, there's not too many Lawrence Eliards, which is probably a good thing. But
it's useful. Daniel Wood is too common a name.
Yeah, exactly. It's like John Smith, only one of those. Yeah. Yeah. So no, it's interesting. I think whether you have a more common name or a rare name, it's still your signature. It's your identity. So I think whatever you have, I think it's a beautiful representation of your, claim, your declaration to the world. So I think, embrace it. You got your parents for a reason. You got what you got. Yeah. So then you go, okay, now I get to work with it. So that's a gift.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Lawrence. And I'll speak to you soon.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining this episode with Lawrence Eliard. I always like ending these episodes by taking a moment to break down what we in the Swedish Wealth Institute team found the most important takeaways. Because it's one thing to listen to an interesting conversation, it's another to actually take something from it and use it. So here at the Swedish Wealth Institute, we're always looking for the answer to one simple question. What is the difference that makes the difference? So from this conversation, here are 5 things that we think might be worth taking with you. 1, wellness is becoming practical, not fringe. A lot of the things that used to be called woo-woo, breathwork, cold plunges, sauna, red light therapy, meditation, grounding, are now becoming a part of normal conversations around health. And I think that shift matters because people are starting to take a more proactive approach to their well-being instead of waiting until something breaks. Number 2, sleep is not just rest. It's recovery, repair, and preparation. So Lawrence really made an important point about sleep. It's not about just going to bed earlier. It's about how you prepare yourself for sleep, getting away from the screens, calming your nervous system, and having a proper evening rhythm using breath, reflection, gratitude, and whatever helps your body understand that the day is over. Number 3, presence is one of the simplest wellness practices we keep missing. I personally like the part where we talked about people filming sunsets or fireworks instead of actually experiencing them. It's a great reminder how much of our modern lifestyle pulls us out of the moment, and sometimes we miss what's actually happening. Number 4, your body is giving you information all the time. We talked about trusting what your body is telling you, whether it feels like a yes, a no, or something you need to pay attention to. That doesn't mean we throw logic away. It means that if we want better health, better decisions, and better energy, we need to live from the body, not just the mind. 5, service changes the whole direction of your energy. One of my favorite parts of the conversation was when Lawrence shared what his Buddhist teacher had told him. If you want to go faster, come from a place of service. This is such a powerful idea, one we try to live here at the Swedish Wealth Institute. When you shift from what do I get to how can I contribute, you change the way you show up in business, relationships, and real life. Before you go, we've prepared something for you. I would love to invite you to the Swedish Wealth Institute community and give you 2 weeks free access. Because in the community, we help you figure out 3 things. Where are you now? Where are you going? And what is your number 1 limiting factor? Our technology will help you connect to the right path to solving that limiting factor. That could be an accountability buddy. We can match you with one of the other members from all over the world. It could be a peer group and making multiple friends, because it can be really lonely to be an entrepreneur. Or it could be one of the courses in our course catalog, Mastery Academy, featuring Jack Canfield, Dr. John DeMartini, and many more amazing teachers. You'll find the link in the show notes so you can claim your 2 weeks free access. If this episode gave you something useful, please feel free to share it with anyone who you think needs to hear it. And of course, please do, like thousands of other people all over the world, and follow or subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And of course, if you have the time, please give us a 5-star review. It really makes a big difference. I am really excited about next week's episode. I'll be interviewing Tessa White, known as the Job Doctor. That conversation is especially interesting because Tessa has a very practical way about talking about career, work, conflict, and the future of education. This is something that, we are highly interested in here at the Swedish Wealth Institute. So we talk about her entire journey. How did she grow on social media? How did she publish her book? What most people misunderstand about building a career, and how the future of education is going to look in leadership, money, conflict, career growth. This is going to be really cool. I'm Daniel Wood. This is the Swedish Wealth Institute Podcast, and thank you for joining us.
When the pandemic hit and I was locked in my house, I had decided to retire and I got bored. I had 10,000 followers after 3 days. Before I knew it, I had 1 million followers, and I really call myself an accidental influencer. This was the Job Doctor was the idea that wanted to happen, and there was literally nothing I could do to shut it down. Midway through, my son paralyzed, and I had to stop everything and thought the whole business would die.